A room is rarely controlled by the person who speaks the most. It is often controlled by the person who understands what is happening before everyone else does. People enter a room carrying emotions, ambitions, insecurities, expectations, and hidden agendas. Some want recognition, some want approval, some want power, some are afraid of being ignored. Others are waiting for someone else to make the first mistake. Control yourself before attempting to control the room, because the first person you must be able to influence is yourself. A room is filled with emotions, expectations, competition, insecurity, ambition, and hidden tension. And if you enter that environment without control over your own reactions, you will easily become controlled by whatever happens around you. Someone may challenge you, criticize your idea, interrupt you, ignore you, or deliberately provoke you, and your immediate reaction can reveal more about your weakness than your words ever could. If you become angry, defensive, nervous, or desperate to prove yourself, the room can sense it. People may not consciously identify what they are seeing, but they notice changes in your voice, posture, timing, facial expression, and choice of words. This is why influence begins internally. Before you try to shape the atmosphere, learn to manage your own emotional state. When you remain calm while others become emotional, you create contrast. When everyone is rushing to speak, you can pause. When everyone is reacting, you can observe. When someone attempts to pull you into an unnecessary argument, you can decide whether responding serves your purpose. This ability to choose your reaction is one of the foundations of personal power. Self-control does not mean becoming emotionless. Emotions contain useful information, but they should not automatically become commands. Anger may tell you that a boundary has been crossed. Nervousness may tell you that something matters. Excitement may tell you that an opportunity is present, but you still decide what to do with that information. A person who allows every emotion to dictate behavior becomes predictable. If people know exactly what will make you angry, nervous, or defensive, they can influence you simply by creating the right conditions. A person who remains composed becomes harder to manipulate. This is especially important in conversations where status is uncertain. You may enter a room and immediately feel that someone is more experienced, more confident, or more respected than you. If you allow comparison to control you, your behavior changes. You may speak too quickly, laugh unnecessarily, agree with everything, or try too hard to impress. The desire to prove your value can actually reduce the perception of your value. Instead, remind yourself that you do not need to establish your worth within the first few seconds. Observe, listen, breathe. Give yourself time to understand the environment. Your body also plays an important role in self-control. Slow your breathing, maintain a natural posture, keep your movements deliberate, and avoid unnecessary fidgeting. These behaviors are not tricks for pretending to be confident. They help create a physical state in which you can think more clearly. When your body is rushed, your mind often follows. When your breathing and movements become controlled, you create more space between stimulus and response. That space is where good judgment lives. Self-control also means knowing when not to speak. You do not have to answer every criticism, correct every misunderstanding, or win every disagreement. Sometimes silence protects your position better than an emotional explanation. If you respond to every provocation, you allow other people to determine the direction of the interaction. If you choose your moments carefully, you remain connected to your purpose. Before entering an important room, ask yourself what you want to accomplish. Do you want to communicate an idea, negotiate an agreement, build trust, solve a problem, or simply understand the situation? Having a clear objective makes it easier to ignore distractions. You become less concerned with appearing powerful and more concerned with being effective. The person who controls himself can enter uncertainty without immediately becoming unstable. He can hear criticism without collapsing, receive praise without becoming dependent, and face disagreement without losing his composure. That stability changes the atmosphere around him because people naturally pay attention to someone who appears internally organized. Real control begins when your behavior is determined by your purpose rather than by the reactions of everyone around you. Observe before you speak because the person who understands the room often has an advantage over the person who rushes to fill it with words. Most people enter a conversation thinking about what they want to say, how they will appear, or how they can prove themselves. They become so focused on their own performance that they fail to notice what is actually happening around them. They hear words but miss the relationships, emotions, motives, and patterns underneath those words. Observation changes this. Before speaking, take a moment to understand the environment. Notice who seems comfortable, who appears nervous, who speaks frequently, who remains silent, who interrupts, who receives attention, and who people look toward before making decisions. These details can reveal the informal structure of a group more accurately than official titles or introductions. A person may have a high position but little real influence, while someone who says very little may quietly shape important decisions. If you speak before understanding these dynamics, you may unintentionally challenge the wrong person, support an idea nobody respects, or reveal information that should have remained private. Observation gives you context. It helps you understand what the room needs before you decide what to contribute. This does not mean becoming suspicious of everyone or assuming that every conversation contains hidden manipulation. It means paying attention instead of operating automatically. Listen to the words people choose. Notice what topics make them become more animated. Watch how they respond when someone disagrees. Pay attention to who becomes defensive, who remains curious, and who tries to redirect attention. These reactions can tell you what people value and what they may fear. Silence can also provide information. A person who does not speak may be thinking, observing, disagreeing, or simply uncomfortable. Do not automatically interpret silence as weakness. Give people space. Sometimes the person who speaks last has had the opportunity to hear every argument before offering an opinion. Observation also improves your ability to communicate. When you understand your audience, you can choose language that is relevant to them. A technical explanation may be useful for experts but confusing for beginners. A long speech may be unnecessary when people need a simple decision. If you observe first, you can adjust your communication to the actual situation rather than forcing every room to fit your preferred style. Another benefit is that observation reduces impulsive reactions. Imagine someone makes a sarcastic comment toward you. Your first instinct may be to respond immediately, but if you pause, you may notice that the comment was not serious or that responding emotionally would distract from a more important issue. Perhaps the person is trying to provoke you, perhaps they are nervous, perhaps they misunderstood you. Without observation, you react to your interpretation. With observation, you gather more information before deciding. This is especially useful in tense situations. When emotions rise, slow down rather than speeding up. Listen carefully. Ask a clarifying question if necessary. Do not assume you understand someone's intention simply because you disliked their words. Observation also means noticing yourself. Pay attention to how you behave in different environments. Do you speak too much when you feel insecure? Do you become quiet around people you consider more successful? Do you interrupt when you feel challenged? Do you seek approval through humor? Your own patterns are valuable information. The more you observe yourself, the easier it becomes to change behavior deliberately. Ultimately, observing before speaking is not about manipulating people. It is about replacing automatic reaction with awareness. You become less concerned with being the first voice in the room and more interested in understanding what deserves to be said. When you observe carefully, your words become more precise, your timing improves, and your decisions become less emotional. You do not need to compete for attention every second. You allow the room to reveal itself first, and then you contribute when your words can actually make a difference. Control the pace and energy, because the person who can remain composed while others become rushed, emotional, or distracted often has a powerful influence on the direction of a conversation. Every room has an emotional rhythm. Sometimes people are excited and speaking quickly. Sometimes they are nervous and avoiding important subjects. Sometimes everyone is frustrated and the conversation becomes chaotic. In other situations, the room is quiet because people are waiting for someone to take responsibility. If you allow the atmosphere to control you automatically, your behavior will change with it. You may begin speaking faster because everyone else is speaking fast, become defensive because others are defensive, or lose focus because the room has become distracted. Learning to control pace and energy means developing the ability to remain internally steady while responding appropriately to the environment. This begins with your own rhythm. When you speak too quickly, your words can lose clarity, and people may sense that you are nervous or trying to get through the moment. Slowing down does not mean speaking unnaturally or dramatically. It means giving your thoughts enough time to become clear. Pause before important points. Allow people to process what you have said. Do not rush to fill every silence. Silence can create space for thought, and thoughtful pauses can make communication more deliberate. The same principle applies to movement. When your gestures, expressions, and body movements are controlled, your presence can feel more stable. Constant fidgeting, checking your phone, shifting nervously, or reacting dramatically to every statement can communicate uncertainty. You do not need to perform confidence. Simply become comfortable being still when stillness is appropriate. Controlling energy also means understanding when to increase it. Calmness does not mean becoming dull or passive. If the room is tired, a clear question or energetic explanation may bring attention back. If people are excited about an important idea, you can match some of that enthusiasm while remaining organized. Effective influence is not about always being slow and quiet. It is about choosing the emotional intensity that serves the situation. Sometimes the room needs urgency, sometimes it needs calm, sometimes it needs humor, sometimes it needs seriousness. The mistake is allowing the room to choose your emotional state for you. Imagine a meeting where everyone is arguing. People interrupt each other, voices become louder, and the original problem is disappearing beneath emotion. Adding more volume rarely solves the problem. A calmer person can change the rhythm by slowing the discussion. They might say, "Let's separate the issues one at a time." Then they address the central point. This creates structure. When people have a clear sequence to follow, emotional chaos often becomes easier to manage. Another important part of controlling pace is knowing when to wait. Not every question needs an immediate answer. If someone asks you something unexpected, you can pause and think. If someone makes an accusation, you can ask for clarification rather than reacting defensively. If negotiations become tense, you can take time before committing. Patience prevents emotional urgency from making decisions for you. People often make poor choices because they believe they must respond immediately. Sometimes the strongest response is to say that you need time to consider the matter. You should also learn to recognize the energy of individuals. Some people dominate through constant talking. Others influence through quiet attention. Some become aggressive when challenged. Others withdraw. Understanding these differences allows you to communicate more effectively. You do not need to overpower a loud person with greater volume. You can slow the interaction, ask precise questions, and bring attention back to facts. Likewise, you can invite a quiet person to contribute rather than allowing louder voices to dominate. This creates a more balanced environment and can increase your influence because people recognize that you are paying attention to the entire room. Controlling pace and energy ultimately means becoming an anchor rather than another source of instability. When others become rushed, you become deliberate. When they become distracted, you become focused. When emotions rise, you become clearer. When the moment requires energy, you provide it purposefully. You are not trying to control people through pressure. You are controlling your own contribution to the atmosphere, and that often influences the atmosphere more than force ever could. Speak with purpose, not neediness, because every word you use communicates something about your confidence, priorities, and emotional state. When people are desperate to be noticed, accepted, or respected, they often speak far more than necessary. They explain every decision, defend every opinion, interrupt silence, and continue talking long after their main point has been understood. This usually happens because they are trying to control how others perceive them. They fear being misunderstood, ignored, or judged, so they keep adding words in the hope that eventually everyone will approve. But excessive explanation can create the opposite effect. The more desperately you try to prove your value, the more uncertain you may appear. Purposeful communication begins with knowing why you are speaking. Before you open your mouth, ask yourself what you want the other person to understand, decide, or do. If you have no clear purpose, silence may be more useful. This does not mean becoming quiet all the time. It means becoming selective. A person with something meaningful to contribute does not need to compete for every moment of attention. When you speak, make your point clearly, support it with relevant information, and allow the other person to respond. You do not need to keep talking simply because there is silence. Silence can be uncomfortable, especially when you are worried about how others perceive you, but learning to tolerate it creates greater control. Nervous people often rush to fill silence because they interpret it as rejection. A confident person can allow a pause without immediately assuming something has gone wrong. This creates a calmer rhythm and gives both people time to think. Purposeful speech also requires removing unnecessary emotional decoration. Instead of saying, "I am really, really sorry, and I know this might sound stupid, but maybe we could possibly consider this idea. You can communicate more directly. I have another idea we could consider." The second statement is clearer because it does not apologize for existing. Confidence does not require arrogance. You can be respectful without making yourself smaller. You can disagree without attacking. You can ask for something without begging. You can explain a boundary without becoming aggressive. The goal is clarity. Another important principle is to avoid constantly proving that you are right. If someone challenges your opinion, you do not need to turn every disagreement into a competition. Listen carefully. If they have evidence that changes your understanding, adjust. If you still disagree, state your reasoning calmly. When your identity is not dependent on winning, you become more persuasive because people sense that you are interested in the issue rather than merely protecting your ego. Speaking with purpose also means choosing the right moment. Even a valuable idea can fail if delivered at the wrong time. Observe the situation. If emotions are high, perhaps wait. If someone is already explaining an important point, do not interrupt simply because you want attention. If a decision is being made, offer your strongest information rather than every thought you have. Timing gives words greater weight. You should also understand that listening is part of purposeful communication. If you are constantly preparing your next statement, you are not truly listening. Pay attention to what the other person says, what they avoid saying, and what they seem to need from the conversation. Then respond to what is actually present rather than to assumptions in your head. This makes your communication more accurate and less reactive. Purposeful speech also protects your reputation. People remember patterns. If you consistently speak with clarity, avoid unnecessary drama, and contribute useful ideas, others begin to associate your presence with value. You do not have to demand attention because people learn that when you speak, there is usually a reason. That reputation develops slowly through repeated behavior. Ultimately, speaking with purpose means removing the need to perform. You are not speaking to prove that you are intelligent, powerful, interesting, or worthy. You are speaking because you have something useful, honest, necessary, or meaningful to contribute. Once you stop chasing reactions, your communication becomes calmer and stronger. You say less when less is needed, speak firmly when something matters, listen when others have something valuable to offer, and remain comfortable when silence is the better choice. Understand what people want, because influence becomes much stronger when you stop thinking only about what you want to say and begin paying attention to what matters to the people around you. Every person enters a conversation with desires, fears, expectations, priorities, and personal concerns. Some want recognition, some want security, some want respect, some want freedom, others want opportunities, belonging, approval, or simply to feel heard. If you ignore these motivations, you may speak perfectly and still fail to influence anyone. But when you understand what people value, your communication becomes more relevant and more effective. This does not mean manipulating people or pretending to care about things you do not care about. It means recognizing that every person sees a situation through their own interests and experiences. If you want cooperation, you must understand why cooperation matters to the other person. If you want someone to consider an idea, explain how that idea connects with something they genuinely value. People are naturally more attentive when they can see meaning for themselves. Imagine trying to persuade a person to accept a new responsibility. If you speak only about why you need their help, they may feel pressured. But if you understand that they want greater responsibility and recognition, you can explain how the opportunity may help them develop those qualities. The conversation changes because you are no longer speaking only from your perspective. You are connecting your objective with theirs. This principle begins with listening. Do not listen merely for the words someone says. Listen for what those words reveal. Notice which subjects make them enthusiastic, which concerns they repeat, and which situations make them defensive. Pay attention to what they praise in other people. Someone who constantly admires independence may value freedom more than status. Someone who frequently talks about achievement may be motivated by progress and recognition. Someone who repeatedly emphasizes stability may place security above adventure. These observations can help you communicate more intelligently, but they should never become excuses to stereotype people. Individuals are complicated, and motivations can change depending on circumstances. The goal is not to label people permanently, but to remain curious about what drives their decisions. Understanding what people want also helps you avoid unnecessary conflict. Many arguments appear to be about facts when they are actually about deeper needs. One person may insist on being right because they feel their competence is being questioned. Another may resist a change because they fear losing control. Someone may become defensive because they feel ignored rather than because they disagree with the actual idea. If you understand the underlying concern, you may be able to address the real issue instead of fighting about the surface argument. This requires patience. Do not assume you know what someone wants simply because their behavior seems obvious. Ask questions. Give them room to explain themselves. Sometimes the fastest way to understand someone is to stop talking and allow them to reveal their priorities naturally. You should also understand your own motivations. If you are trying to influence a room while secretly desperate for approval, your behavior may become inconsistent. You might agree too quickly, avoid necessary disagreement, or exaggerate your confidence. Self-awareness helps you recognize when your own desires are interfering with your judgment. The more secure you become internally, the easier it is to understand other people without becoming controlled by their reactions. Understanding what people want can also make leadership more effective. A leader who only gives orders may receive temporary compliance, but a leader who understands the needs of the people involved can create genuine cooperation. People work harder when they understand why their contribution matters. They become more committed when they feel respected. They respond better when expectations are clear and connected to meaningful outcomes. Influence, therefore, does not always come from speaking with authority. Sometimes it comes from understanding. When people feel that you have actually listened to them, they are more willing to listen to you. This creates a form of influence based on relevance rather than pressure. The objective is not to control every desire around you. It is to recognize the human motivations operating in every room and communicate with awareness. When you understand what people value, you can choose better words, better timing, and better solutions. You become less focused on winning conversations and more focused on creating outcomes that actually work. Leave the room with your position stronger, because true influence is measured not by how much attention you receive during an interaction, but by what remains after the interaction ends. Many people enter a room focused on winning the moment. They want to speak the most, appear intelligent, dominate the conversation, or make everyone notice them. But attention is temporary. What matters more is whether your reputation, relationships, credibility, and objectives are stronger when you leave than when you arrived. A person can dominate a conversation and still lose influence if everyone leaves feeling exhausted, manipulated, or disrespected. Real influence is quieter and more lasting. Before entering an important room, know what you want to accomplish. Perhaps you want to communicate an idea, solve a disagreement, build trust, negotiate an agreement, or understand a situation. Without a clear objective, it is easy to become distracted by ego. Someone challenges you, and suddenly your goal changes from solving the problem to proving that you are right. Someone criticizes you, and you spend the rest of the conversation defending yourself. Someone receives attention, and you begin competing for it. When you know your purpose, these distractions have less power. You can ask whether each response moves you closer to your objective or simply satisfies your emotions. Leaving your position stronger also requires protecting your reputation. Reputation is built through repeated experiences. If people consistently see you as calm, prepared, fair, and reliable, your words begin to carry greater weight. You do not need to announce that you are trustworthy. Your behavior communicates it. If you repeatedly interrupt, exaggerate, gossip, or react emotionally, people remember those patterns too. One dramatic moment may attract attention, but consistent behavior creates credibility. This is why you should think beyond the immediate conversation. Ask yourself how today's behavior will affect the relationship tomorrow. Winning an argument may feel satisfying, but if you damage a valuable relationship unnecessarily, the short-term victory may become a long-term loss. Strong positioning often means knowing when to compromise, when to stand firm, and when to walk away. Not every disagreement deserves maximum force. Sometimes you gain more by allowing another person to feel heard. This does not mean surrendering your principles. It means recognizing that people are more likely to cooperate when they feel respected. You can disagree while preserving the relationship. You can state a firm position without humiliating someone. You can correct an error without turning the correction into a personal attack. This creates influence because people remember how you made them feel as well as what you said. Another part of leaving the room stronger is knowing when to stop talking. Once your main point has been communicated, continuing to speak can weaken it. You may introduce unnecessary details, contradict yourself, or reveal information that did not need to be revealed. Say what is necessary, answer legitimate questions, and recognize when the conversation has reached its useful limit. Leaving at the right moment can preserve clarity. It also prevents you from becoming emotionally trapped in the interaction. You should also leave with information. Every room can teach you something. Who supported the idea? Who resisted? What concerns appeared repeatedly? What did you misunderstand? What did you learn about the people involved? Observation after the conversation is just as important as observation during it. Review what happened without becoming obsessed with it. Identify what worked, what failed, and what you should do differently next time. This turns every interaction into experience. The strongest position is therefore not simply having more authority. It is having greater clarity, stronger relationships, better information, and more options after the conversation than before it. You want people to leave thinking that your presence added something valuable. You want your credibility intact. You want your objective closer to reality. You want to have protected your dignity without creating unnecessary conflict. When you consistently approach rooms this way, influence becomes less about performance and more about results. You no longer need to dominate every conversation because you understand that lasting power comes from what you build over time: trust, competence, reputation, relationships, and the ability to remain composed when others become distracted by the moment.